Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. You got me, you got Eric Worrell here, but Steve's going to take this episode off. But we do have a guest on the podcast who I think you're really going to enjoy hearing his story. He's got a really interesting backstory, and he's done some incredible things with his investments, not just your typical rental properties. I mean, he's gotten into cell phone towers, short-term rentals. He just kind of experiments all over the place. So really excited to welcome Jay Massey from Cash Flow Diary to the podcast. How you doing, Jay?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
Jay, I'm really impressed with a lot of the things that you've been able to accomplish. I mean, you got a great following online of people that are really learning a lot from you and being able to grow their real estate portfolios and investments in unusual ways. But before we get to all of that, I'd really like to hear about your background story. I mean, how did you get involved in investing? I mean, where does your story begin?
Yeah, well, it begins with tragedy. Like, I mean, I think how many of your guests have that in common? Yeah. Where it's like, but at the end of the day, one of the things I want to say to everybody before they hear it is, I did not wake up one day and say, ooh, I want to do real estate. It was more of a solution to a problem that my wife and I were experiencing. So when my wife is pregnant, she has a condition known as hyperemesis. Basically, that means she can't eat or drink while pregnant. And that was stressful for me. I was born with asthma, and one day to go blow off steam, I went to play volleyball, and I jumped to spike the ball, landed on a guy's head, punctured my lung, which then I developed a condition known as pleurisy. So if you can imagine, here's the situation, is my wife can't eat or drink, also meaning she can't work, and I can't walk or talk simultaneously without fainting, also meaning I can't work. And even though we had our 6 to 10 months of expenses set aside, because that was good financial planning practice, it was one of those times where we realized 6 to 10 months might not be enough if you end up in a very interesting, quote unquote, medical situation. Sure. And what happened is I realized a very painful lesson. I had been told, like many others, go to school, get good grades, get a job. That's what it was. But that plan didn't really work for me. And I found out that I didn't really need a job, but what I needed was a source of income. And that was a key distinction that I required in order to make some changes. So I started selling our personal possessions on eBay. This is back in the days when CompUSA, for those of you who remember, when that store was going out of business. So I would go buy their inventory at a discount and then just clean it up a little bit, take some better photos, market it better, and put it online on eBay and sell it for the markup in the middle. And we would start to do thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of dollars a month on eBay that way. But that was very tiring and stressful.
Were you making all the trips down to the post office like crazy, or how did that work?
Yes. Yeah, I was.
That's always the hang up for me. I'm like, I don't want to do any of that.
It was, I was batch processing. So I would literally, you don't understand. I had a route of all the CompUSAs, and I would literally go to each CompUSA and buy the same things, all of their inventory of the same item. Then later that day, I would do the batch photography. Then I would do batch listings. I'd do batch postings. And then I would hope all of them would sell near the same time. And then the next day I would just batch the shipping, and then I'd do it all over again.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like you listen to somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of, and he's still talking about stuff like that. He's like, you want to make $50? You can make $50 right now. Go to Amazon, buy something, resell it on eBay. You can do it. Or maybe it's vice versa, but
on that point, yeah, I definitely tell people, because before we were buying stuff on CompUSA, I went in our closet. That's what I did. I looked for stuff in our closet in our garage and go, hey, what do we have? And I know every person listening, if you have the capacity to hear this particular episode, you are wealthy enough, quote unquote, to go to your garage, your closet, and find $3,000 worth of stuff you could put on eBay right now. Every one of you, period. And because the reason I know that is because after my closet was empty, I went to all my friends' house and said, hey, can I have this? Can I have that? And I started putting it on eBay and selling it. And that's when a friend said, dude, you need to become a real estate investor. Now, you got to understand something, Eric.
Okay.
At this moment, I have a credit score of 398.
Yep.
I have literally no money coming in. I have just enough money coming in so that I can eat. That's really what's going down.
Yeah.
And he's like, you should become a real estate investor. And I don't know if you've ever seen a dog like look at you with their head to the side a little bit. Like that was kind of my look to him at that moment. Like, what are you talking about, dude?
Yeah.
How is that going to work?
I'll just put down, this item I got out of my friend's closet as a down payment. And I'm sure the banks will be really excited to hear about my eBay income as a stable source of income. I mean, where do you even start with that?
There were so many questions, but a lot of the questions that I had were just based upon ignorance. And unfortunately, there are times where we as humans can take our ignorance as fact and not actually be willing to question it.
Sure.
And it was one of the few times where I let what I didn't let what I didn't know stop me. Because that's what happens when I say, hey, become a real estate investor. Many people jump to that same conclusion. I don't have money. I don't have credit. I don't know what I'm doing. So I can't do it. Or are any of those things immutable? Can they be changed? Of course. Give yourself permission to allow it to be changed. And that's what happened. And as it turns out, the first strategy in real estate that I started practicing is called wholesaling, which is the exact same process of what I was doing with all the stuff in CompUSA and the garage sales, etc. It's the exact same process. You find a house for a discount, you sell it for a discount, and you do so quickly. And I'm like, hold on, wait, what? You could do this with real estate? Why didn't somebody tell me?
Yeah.
And I did my first 200 transactions that way. We typically had a transaction processing time of less than 72 hours. We would earn between $2,000 to $26,000 per transaction. And you want to talk about a life-changing, paradigm-shifting thing. We went from what you used to imagine, going from what you earn in a year to what you earn in a month. And it just changes everything. In fact, I'm still one of the few people that I know that at that time we were technically squatting in bank-owned property, homeless, but we actually owned rental property. It was the craziest situation possibly imaginable, at the time. But that's what happened.
Well, I love the fact that you pretty much took something that you're already doing and then realized that there was this other option available to you out there that could just scale it, because it's pretty hard to scale selling stuff out of your closet. But when you got into wholesaling, there's always deals out there. I mean, what did you start with? I mean, how were you finding these deals that you were wholesaling? Were you knocking doors or like doing this local marketing, or what were you doing?
And that was my secret, because you got to remember, just because I was suddenly going down this real estate path, it's not like the world divided in my time and I suddenly got 28 hours a day. I still was dealing with my wife and her condition, my own condition. My oldest daughter was already here. All of these things, life was still happening. So I only had to no more than 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week to make this happen. So I had to get hyper efficient with what I call the IGA, income generating activities. And what I started doing is, instead of, because that's what most people do, they'll start knocking on doors looking for properties. And that's not the solution. The solution is to look and uncover problems. People have problems. So I started learning how to generate referrals, and more importantly, let people know that I solve problems. And nobody loves anything more than to share their problems and to provide a solution to a friend who has a problem. So I started marketing for problems. I would go to a networking event and just talk about problems, not properties. I'm looking for someone who's behind on their mortgage, having trouble making payments, someone who's feeling stressed right now that they're not going to be able to keep their rental property. I didn't care about where it was and all this other situation. Looking for someone who's got a lot of property and looking to retire and is tired of managing property. These are all keywords and phrases that I would use that would result in, oh, my friend said that they had this and my friend said they had that. That was cheaper because I didn't have the ability to do an ad campaign of any kind. I had no resources, so I had to leverage referrals in that way. And then the second thing that I did, and I still do to this day, is I practice what I call educate to dominate. He or she who is willing, keywords, to educate their market will dominate their market, period.
Okay.
And that's what I started doing by teaching people about cash flow via the Cash Flow 101 board game by Robert Kiyosaki. So I've done that for a number of years, and between those two things, it just built my business.
The first part that you're mentioning, I think, is really interesting because, maybe it's people aren't having a conversation with their friends saying like, I want to just sell all my properties, but they're talking about the pains that they have. So you kind of identified the pains that people are talking about because it makes that connection for those people who are networking you into these opportunities. I think that's really smart. And then the second aspect of it where you're talking about educating people, is that just more so because you became this resource and people started to know you as this resource of education, so they were more likely then to, hook you up over here or network you with somebody over here? Or how did that help your business by educating people?
Yeah, that was the benefit. That was actually the benefit. I was trying to find a marketing strategy that would attract strangers to me because, if you grew up anything like I did, my mom said, don't talk to strangers. And now suddenly I'm in business and I have to talk to strangers. So I'm like, what's the most comfortable way to talk to strangers? And a board game, over a board game seemed to work. So that got the strangers in the room, and then they got to know me and we developed a little bit of a relationship. And then they could understand what it is that I was after. And yes, because I was focused on serving first, or as Gary Vaynerchuk would say, it was a bunch of the jab, 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 then the right hook. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. And then when it came time for, hey, something that I needed, there were all these people who had spent hours with me in an educational environment that I had asked nothing from them. I had to ask nothing from them for. And then what ended up happening is when it came time for something, they were like, yeah, I got a friend over here, or I have a retirement plan over here, or this person I ran into, or they themselves were the person. And that just led to the next person and just led to the next person. And it's the least expensive way to launch a business of this kind, especially, again, it's not like that was the path I chose.
Yeah,
I had no other resources.
Yeah. If you're looking at it and you're in a similar situation, and you're listening right now where you've thought about getting into real estate, or maybe you just got one rental property and you're like, I don't have the money to get into a second and third and fourth. I think this is an interesting listen because you don't necessarily need the money if you've got the willpower and the brains to kind of go after, what's going to work for you. And in your situation, you realized, hey, I don't have the money to do mass advertising here or anything like that. And I don't have time necessarily to knock doors based on your schedule. So you figured out networking was the way to do it. And it sounds like, I'm sure you've probably read this book or heard of it, but Robert Cialdini's book on persuasion.
Yeah.
You're reciprocity, right? You were giving people something
100.
for free, and in return, they're more likely to want to do business with you or help you out. For our listeners that haven't read that book, if you want to get into sales, marketing of any sort, that's an excellent book to read. I believe that's where they talk about a case study where somebody would walk people through a museum, right? And at the end of the museum tour, they'd ask them for a donation to the museum. And I forget the numbers, I'll make something up, but maybe on average, a person would donate like $1. And then they did the same exact study and walk people through the same museum, but they would give them a Coke. They give them a Coca-Cola at the beginning of the tour. So they give them something pretty relatively cheap. And at the end, they ended up like tripling, quadrupling the amount of donations that they got from people. And it's just basically when you go to the food courts and it's always the Chinese food, right? They're giving you a free sample and they know it works.
All day long.
Yeah. So
right. It does.
You were that guy hucking out, free samples of Chinese food, but you were given education.
Correct. And that's the thing. And I did it in such a way such that it impacted their life. Like I would use examples that I know that they would likely to encounter. For example, like the next time you go buy shoes or go to the grocery store, or this is how you can relate going to the grocery store to how you buy real estate. And once you start making those types of connections, you can't escape the idea. I mean, ideas can be very much like viruses. Once you got it, you got it, and it just continues to take hold of the mind and body until you do something about it. And that's what I would do. And I enjoyed doing. I still enjoy doing it. That's why we do the things that we do. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it started transforming people's minds and lives. I started, seeing that, mothers, fathers, husbands, brothers would make different decisions and end up with different results. And it was like, wow, this is exciting and fun. But what I do find interesting, Eric, do you realize that if I say to people, or if someone said, hey, I want to become a doctor, or I want to become an engineer, or I want to become an accountant or something of that nature. If I said one of those things, in those instances, never once do we think about what we don't necessarily have. Like, for example, you don't hear, I want to become a doctor. Oh, I don't have the money for that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, that's not a common objection.
Yeah.
They just go, okay, well, if I'm going to become a doctor, then I have to go, these are the steps. It's just an accepted path.
Yeah.
Only when we say things like real estate and asset related that we go, I don't have the money for that. When did you having the money actually matter? The question is can you solve a problem? Because the last time I checked, when you did go to the doctor, you didn't ask him how much money he or she had. You didn't ask him what college they went to. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was, can they solve the problem that you are currently seeking a solution for? And if you believed they could, that's all it took, then you did whatever was necessary. You took their advice, and in exchange, they received the money that they originally needed or might need to pay off that student loan that they now have.
Yeah.
And real estate's no different.
That's awesome. I love the analogies on that too. It makes a lot of sense. I do think that it is one of those things where if you're starting a business or you're getting into real estate, you don't always get the same kind of response that you would get if you're telling, mom or dad that you're going to be a doctor. Maybe that's just kind of a societal thing, but it's cool the way that you were able to frame that. And I'm curious. So you got involved with wholesaling to start. Where did you go from there? What was your next move?
Well, after wholesaling, what happened is that as I was going through the wholesaling process, I started, I ended up in a different tax bracket, and that caused a different kind of pain that I had never experienced before. And I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, if I know how to do wholesaling, what's the cure for this new pain? And it became holding on to properties long term. And you got to remember, originally, my solution was a source of income. Wholesaling can still be like a job, meaning I have to physically get up and do something in order for income to come in. And while, yes, it was, more commas and zeros on the paycheck, it still required my physical human effort on a day-to-day basis. So I was still seeking for a way for income to come in and not be disrupted without my personal involvement. So I started holding property. That was the solution. I started building a portfolio of single family houses at first. And then after single family houses, I got kind of bored with those. So we ended up with, a few hundred of single family houses. And I got bored with those. And then I moved over to mortgages and notes. And those were really, really boring. So because there was, they were boring for me, and they're still boring in my mind, but they're a great strategy because you literally have nothing to do after you own the mortgage, but wait for the check to arrive. And I know for some people, they're like, I'll take that kind of boring, and that's good.
Yeah.
But for me and my personality, it just didn't fit because I'm like, there was just nothing for me to do. And then after I got bored with that, I moved over to commercial. After commercial, after that, I went to apartment buildings, and then apartment buildings are still interesting to me. I like those.
Yeah.
But apartment buildings then spawn off all these other unique ideas, which is where the cell phone towers and commercial property come in. And that's kind of why I say what I do is cash flow. I care about cash flow. I don't care about the underlying asset. In fact, I don't really like real estate. I could care less about the walls and the roof and what's it made of and blah, whatever. I care about the benefits that real estate produces, which is a stream of uninterruptible income that can happen on a daily, weekly, monthly basis without my personal involvement. Any asset that has that is something I'm interested in, which again, cell phone towers are really great for that.
Yeah, I got to pick your brain a little bit more on that, because how does that work exactly? Because when I read that on your website about a cell phone tower, I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like you can buy and own and rent out a cell phone tower or lease it? I mean, what exactly is that?
It's exactly that. It's really straightforward. It's just you just don't think of them as your customers or as your tenant. So imagine, T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, all of these carriers, they don't, first of all, own or build all of their towers. Let's start right there. So there's an opportunity for people who want to be a builder, or if you are a builder, to build the physical tower for the cellular carrier. That's opportunity number one. Number two is that tower is attached to a piece of real estate. Again, the carrier doesn't always own that piece of real estate. So if you've got vacant land, or if you've got a tall building in the right area, you can use your rooftop, which is how we did it. You have the rooftop. And what ends up happening is that the carrier rents that space or that tower and pays you rent, period, for being there. And you end up in some of the highest dollars per square foot you'll ever get.
Oh, yeah,
because right.
Yeah.
Because you don't, and there's like no maintenance because they're going to take care of that. And the really, really cool part, here's the part that I like about it, that some of your listeners who are participating in 401ks and IRAs probably won't like, but I'll just tell you because this is how it works, is that stream of income, so a cell phone tower lease could be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years with various types of renewable times inside there. Okay. So it has a stream of income for a significant period of time by arguably a very credit-worthy tenant. Okay.
Sure.
And that stream of income, and just for the sake of discussion, let's just say that stream of income is $2,500 a month. Now, mind you, it's $2,500, 500 square feet. Yep. Really nice. So,
I mean, is that pretty? Now, when you pull that number 2,500, are you basing that on experience, or are you just kind of throwing a number out there?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
So if somebody's listening, because I'm sure they're doing the same thing I am,
number.
where they're sitting there going, all right, like, what are you getting? Like a few hundred, a few thousand. So, all right, 2,500. Another question I have on that, though, is as far as the construction of that, I mean, how do you begin a construction project? Because that's not something, I watch a DIY video on YouTube for.
No, you are correct. No, they each of the carriers have their own authorized builders who do that. So unless you are someone who's looking to build on behalf of the carrier and being on their approved quote unquote vendor list, etc., that's not just something you're not going to just go build one and say, hey, buy it from me. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Right. But that's funny. But here's my point. So let's just say anywhere from $1,500. I'd say a realistic number is anywhere from $1,500 up to $2,500, depending on how many towers they're placing, the metropolitan market that you're in. Like if you're in a major market, you're probably going to get more than you would if you're in the middle of nowhere. Okay, but you could still get paid either way. But that stream of income, $2,500 a month, $1,500 a month, it doesn't really matter. It has a capitalization rate. And for those of you familiar with apartment complexes, it's the same idea. So here's a number of a transaction that I actually did myself. I think this one was, I want to say it was $1,263 a month. So if I multiply 1,263 out over 12 months, I believe that was close to it was $15,000 a year. So it's a stream of income of $15,000 a year. I forgot how many years it was still promised into the future, but I was able to sell that stream of $15,000 a year to a hedge fund for a little more than $250,000.
Wow. Just give me a second for my brain is still fully wrapping around my head right now as you say that.
Sure.
So fill in some of the blanks. So I'm thinking, all right, this hedge fund, why would they buy something? I see that you have maybe a long-term contract so they can see that this is going to be a stable income going forward. But how does that part of it work?
That's exactly what it is. So here's what happens when you and I or anyone uses their 401k or IRAs. So that money goes into the custodian, that's whatever bank your TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, whomever. And when all of that money shows up every 2 weeks, first of all, it's a lot of money. Second of all, that person who just received the money or the institution that just received those funds has a really big responsibility, and that responsibility is to earn a return. So what ends up happening is they start looking in the marketplace of, okay, now that we just got $1 billion, how do we go get any return on this money, especially after we've charged these people all of these fees?
Sure.
So we've got all of this fee load to make up for, and we have to give them some money back. How can we do it? Well, their expertise isn't in running transactions. So they start looking for operators out there who know how to produce a return or assets that they can actually purchase, own, and control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when that happens and you have those kinds of resources, you need assets that are easily managed. So something like a cell phone tower contract is easily manageable because you're dealing with another large entity on the other end as the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't require day-to-day intervention.
So you're saying your cell phone tower has never started smoking cigarettes indoors, and the tenant upstairs called you complaining about it?
You got it.
Yeah.
And because of that, a hedge fund or any other fund can actually manage a portfolio of cell phone tower contracts way easier than they could an apartment building.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so what they'll do is they'll pay, well, then you also have to understand the time value of money. Money today, in an inflationary economy like ours, money today is always worth more than money tomorrow. So from their perspective, they just got a ton of money today,
mm-hmm.
but they need to produce a return and over a long period of time. And if I've got a contract that's $15,000 a year and they know they can keep it for 20, 30, 40 years, they're like, okay, we can begin to do that, but we need to buy like 400 of these contracts.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, here's my one.
Sure.
And there you go. And if you do the math on $15,000, a year, what they need is they need to keep that contract for about 17 or 16 and a half years before they're at quote unquote break even. Well, if it's a contract that's for 20, 30, 40 years, they're like, okay, we can break even. They can afford, because we are giving them, the American population, we give them so much money, they can afford to play a long game like that to where it says, you know what?
Yeah,
we can wait 17 years. And that's what they do. But to me, the owner of that contract, I want the $250,000 now. I don't want to wait 17 years for the $250,000.
Sure.
Because I could take the $250,000 today and go do something else with it. So many other things.
That's awesome. I love that story. I was already interested in learning about the cell phone story, and it was way more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
Well, here's the best. No, here's the even better part, because the best play on these. So for all of you out there, the best play on these is to find them already attached to a commercial building. And if you can find a vacant commercial building with the cell phone tower attached, this is by far the best, because what often happens is that the seller of the building doesn't place a proper valuation on the cell phone tower income, which, okay, it's fine. So what you end up doing is you end up buying this vacant building with the cell phone tower attached. Mm-hmm. And then what's really cool is that you can separate those two things and sell the cell phone tower off separately and then still keep the building. Which is great.
I mean, it pretty much sounds like I'm sure a lot of people are more familiar with the concept of like selling billboard advertising space off your building. And it sounds like that just kind of on steroids, pretty much.
Yeah, because, I mean, let's just talk about future proofing for a second. I don't know the last time I paid attention to a billboard, mm-hmm. but I do know the last time I used my cell phone.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just say that, while billboard and outdoor advertising isn't quite dead yet,
sure,
I will say that more eyeballs are on cell phones than there are on billboards.
Yeah, and if you're selling the contract right over to the hedge fund, then you're not even worried about what technology is going to do in 15 years because that's their contract now, right?
And that's exactly why I sold it, because that I didn't want the risk. It's like, cool, I could get this $15,000 a year for the next, whatever. Yeah. But I didn't want that risk of
Facebook
it not
starts
happening.
Floating hot air balloons all over the country, casting Wi-Fi and cellular service. And you're like, no, I have 47 cell towers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There you go. I didn't want that risk. So that exactly. You hit it nail on the head.
So Jay, I know we're kind of getting towards the end of the episode here, but I wanted to I wanted to pick your brain a little bit and get some of your insights on short-term rentals, because this is something that comes up, especially in our Facebook group at Rent Prep for Landlords on Facebook there. We get a lot of people that are interested in possibly getting into like Airbnbs and things like that and furnished apartments because they see how you can make some more money on that. I know you have a ton of experience here.
Yeah.
How'd you get involved with that? What has your experience been like so far?
Sure. Okay. I've got a lot to say here.
If you've got the time, I've got the time. It's up to you.
Okay, then sounds great. So here's the thing. At my highest, I was around 400, 450 doors. And that was great. Except one problem is that one of the things that's maybe not talked about enough, in my opinion, is that being a landlord is a great way to build wealth, but wealth does not equal income. It's a horrible way to build income until the mortgages are paid off. If you still have debt service on your stuff, like I know, that you're making a choice. Do I upkeep my property or do I take it as cash flow? So you're going either deferred maintenance or you're putting it right back into the property, because anything that would be extra is gone and taken up by debt service.
Sure.
So, but that's okay. That's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. Now, once the debt service is gone, it's heaven. It's a whole different ball game. So what I was looking for was a way to balance the income side. It's like, cool, I could keep building net worth, but I need a way to balance the income side. And because I had done so many deals, I live in California, but I had done so many transactions in Tennessee, in Illinois, in Michigan, in Georgia, just away from home. Mm-hmm. My smaller children didn't really know what daddy did. And that was bothering me. And I was providing so many jobs, yet I'd go to church on Sunday or be in my community and hear people who needed jobs. And I knew I needed people, but I needed people in Tennessee, Illinois, and Georgia. And it was frustrating to me because I was like, I need people and I can't do anything about the people that I see every day because all my jobs are over there. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be able to provide jobs locally. I wanted my kids to be more involved, and I wanted to be able to earn more income without giving up the benefits of real estate at the end of the day. Okay. And if you know anything about the California market, you know that cash flow is not common.
Why is that?
Because I think the prices are ridiculously stupid. I mean, It's a great place to live. I tell people all the time, I live in a postcard. I'm very grateful for it. Mm-hmm. But the numbers don't often make sense unless, and this was the biggest unless ever, unless you can find a way to repurpose that property. And instead of selling it as a traditional rental to one family, you've got to find another way to sell it. So that led me down the path of, I know. Why don't we try assisted living facilities? Okay. And then in California, there's so much red tape that I just got like, you know what? I could do that, but I'm not even going to bother. Yeah. Then I thought about student housing, and I'm like, I just don't want to deal with that customer. That's really what it came down to. It's like there's too much management there. And
there's a little maturity that happens between 20 to 30 and beyond,
Exactly.
I think I'd like to believe that if I was renting today, I'd be a better renter than I was when I was, 20.
I would like, and that was my thought process too. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to skip that phase of life because I just don't want to deal with it.
That prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed yet. You don't want to deal with that runner.
Exactly. I'm like, if I have an option here, I'm going to choose to not deal with that.
Yeah.
But those two strategies, they can solve the income problem and still give you the benefits of real estate. So they really can. And what happened is that I was working with some friends at the time on an international deal for a hotel. For a lot of reasons, I did not pursue it. But it lit this fire of, hey, how about charging on a daily basis? And what about seasonal pricing? All of these other things and serving a completely different customer. So what happened is one of my students actually had been using our information that we produce on raising capital and all this other stuff. And she came to me one day and says, okay, I have this problem. I was like, okay, what's the problem? Because at the time she was in student housing, and I was like, that's profitable. And she had been using our information though in the short-term rental space, and I didn't know it. And she's like, here's what I've been doing. I've got both of these things going. They both produce money, but I don't know which one I should stick with. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the numbers.
Sure.
Because another friend of mine always says, if you do the math will tell you exactly what to do. And I just looked at the numbers and went, hold on. She showed me this, I understood the student housing side. She showed me what was going on the short-term rental side. And I was like, hold on, wait a minute. Is that every month? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, and how long has that been going? She's like, about 18 months. I'm like, every month? And then at that point,
that's when the student or the master became the student, it sounds like.
Yeah. I was like,
wait, what are you doing?
Yeah. Now, and you got to understand, I've had the privilege of speaking on stage with a lot of names people would recognize, been in front of thousands of people, many countries, all this other stuff. And I get offered stuff all the time. 100% of the time I have said no. Mm-hmm. But this is the first time when I was looking at it going, what are you talking about? Is that for real? And I just, at the end, I just told her, I was like, look, not only do you have something here that's great, I don't even think you understand how great it is, but not only should you stop this student housing thing, you should double, triple down on what you're doing over here. And it's so good, I'm going to do it too.
Yeah.
And I think that was the part that probably woke her up, because once I realized what those numbers were, then validated it for myself, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the answer. This is how landlords can finally have income and wealth building at the same property at the same time without having to work a separate job per se in order to make it work. And once I discovered that, validated those numbers, I got overly excited about it, started teaching and telling people all about it. And we've been able to produce some amazing results for people retiring in record time. I mean, we've been retiring people for a while. We've been producing 6-figure students for a while. I think this is the strategy that produced our first 7-figure student, which I'm pretty excited about.
That's incredible.
And I know there'll be many more. There can't help but be that many more, because I've never seen anything so adaptable by so many different people. I mean, we've got students now in Ireland, Russia, Canada, South America. I forget all the places in South America as well, obviously in the US. But this strategy is so universal and is able to be applied so universally that it's like I said, ideas are viral. Mm-hmm. And this is that idea that's it's an entry point for so many people. And I tell people now, if this was available when I got started, knowing everything I know now, if this had been available when I got started, this is what I would have done first, period.
That's, I was going to ask you that question later, because I feel like that's always such a good question to ask. Like, knowing what you know now, what would you go back to? So yeah. That's a pretty bold statement for somebody who's had as much success as you've had with real estate and different investments. What would you say if somebody's listening and they're interested in that? They can go to Cashflow Diary. Am I wrong in thinking too that you have a Facebook group that's just specifically for short-term rentals?
No, you're not wrong at all. We have a general population and then a student group as well. But so yeah, they're totally there. That's how. One of the things that I've learned in growing up in the real estate industry is that you can't learn to become a new person in a 3-day boot camp or a weekend.
Sure.
And people ask me all the time, Jay, can I do this? And I have to look them in the eyes and say, look, no, you can't. The version of you that's in front of me right now cannot do this. You must be willing to become a new person, you 2.0, if you will. And everyone who's been willing to go through the U 2.0 process has managed to come out on the other side a better human being, and usually has a very nice business on the other end. Now, here's the thing. In order to do that, though, it takes continual touch points through the process. I can't just give you information. It's not a lack of information. That's the issue today. I mean, we've got Google. And for those of you who remember, there are these things called libraries. They exist. How do you categorize and use this information in such a way to actually generate a result? And how do you handle the nuances that you've got to deal with? I mean, there are paradigm shifts around money. Some just simply allowing your mind to accept the fact that what you used to earn a year, you now earn a month, is a paradigm shift, you know?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself can short circuit all kinds of things and throw up just habits of sabotage. You don't even realize you have them until you begin to experience them. And we start these Facebook groups to help people through that process, because it's not the information isn't the issue. The issue is you're bringing you to the table, and there's a lot about you that has to improve in order for you to receive the results that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And the only way I found that allows me to have that kind of touch is through the, Facebook groups and live streaming today. These tools allow me to be able to fulfill on what I was on stage one time with Blair Singer, and what he simply told me was like, Jay, you have to find a way to get a one-to-many strategy. You are one person. How can you affect many with everything you do? And my mindset, from that point was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, how can I take this one thing and make sure that affects thousands, if not tens of thousands, anytime I do it? And that's why we spend so much time with YouTube and live streaming and social media and podcasts, etc., because that's how the information can get to many, many, many people at a time.
I love it. I mean, we couldn't agree here more at RentPrep too. I mean, the Facebook groups are awesome just to see, because it's not only just you, like a one-way conversation, it's a conversation going two ways, and then the other people are joining in and giving support and advice. And it's awesome to see that. I'd definitely be interested in checking that group out, because it's just so cool to see people just be able to feed each other advice and grow together in a specific niche. And especially to what you're saying, it's that idea of, taking your income and making that in a month and having that paradigm shift. And you know what? I'm glad Steve didn't make this podcast today. So if I do end up quitting, getting into real estate full time, he won't know what's up.
Well, it won't take him long to figure it out.
Yeah,
I promise you. Because
somebody in the Facebook group will listen to it. Will be like, "Hey, Steve, I think he left because of this episode."
Yeah, totally. But let's not miss the point, because I know a number of your landlords are like wondering, why on earth would I do this? And what I want to say to them is that what you don't realize is one of your best tenant is the person who wants to operate these short-term rentals. And I'm not saying that just so that our students can have, a place to lease from you. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it because it's true. And all you have to do is just think about this situation for a second. The last time you stayed at a hotel, when you walked through the door, Eric, what did you expect?
I expect it to look nice.
Yep. Yeah, the moment you walk through the door, and when you turn that the handle in the faucet in the tub or in the sink, what did you expect?
Well, some of the hotels I've stayed at, that they're not going to have good water pressure.
They're not going to have good water pressure, but you did expect water to come out, and you expected it to be clean, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I'm a taller fellow, so I usually expect the shower head to be right at about my chin too.
I know, right? Tell me about me too. I have the exact same disease.
Yeah.
So when it came to the sheets, you expected them to be clean. You expected the floor to be clean. You expect it to look like the photos.
Yep.
And what you must understand as a landlord, that me as the operator, I have my guests, my customers hold me to that exact same standard. They expect the moment they walk through that everything works and it looks like the photos. So you're like, Jay, but why is that a benefit? Well, ask yourself, think about your tenants. When is the last time they snaked the drain or cleaned that area on top of the refrigerator or that dust off the ceiling fan? Mm-hmm. When is the last time that happened? When's the last time you did it at your own house?
Yeah.
You didn't. But we have to. Every 5 to 6 days, understand the average guest stays about 6 days. So every 6 days, we've got to clean that thing from top to bottom, because the next person coming in doesn't care how many people were there before. They care that it's clean for them.
Yep.
and we have to have every light switch working. There can be no light bulbs out. You don't understand. It's a huge maintenance undertaking, and we take better care of your property than even you would. Because like I know, you got a scuff mark on one of your near one of your doors at your house that you've been, quote unquote, meaning to take care of. And you're just like, And at some point it just becomes a part of the wall and you just forget about it.
Yeah.
But I can't leave them there. I have to clean them up.
Yep.
Every 5 to 6 days. And we take better care of your property than even you would because our customers demand it. And what landlord wouldn't want someone taking that kind of care of their property?
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify here, these properties, Do you own all of these that you're doing short-term leases with?
Oh, you can do it either way.
But whether are you actually...
I don't. What I'm doing is that I'm switching my assets from the East Coast over to the West Coast. So I've been going through this transition period where we're selling stuff.
Okay.
And now what we're going to do is we're going to start buying stuff out here, specifically in California, because with this type of customer, I can even make California prices actually make sense.
Sure.
Now. So that's what we're doing. Now, I've got some students who've already started purchasing ahead of time. That's what they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a commercial building, an apartment building, or a single family house, it doesn't really matter. The only difference is that it changes how fast you can go to market. So you can totally buy a house, but you still got to do the down payment and you still have to do any rehab that's necessary before you start doing the furnishing. So that changes the amount of upfront investment costs. For those who are tight on cash, I recommend going at it by leasing first because A, it's faster to negotiate a lease. B, you can get more units going and therefore generate cash flow quicker. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening, because this is the math that I did. So let's pretend down payment is going to be, now mind you, I'm in California, so everybody don't freak out. But so let's pretend down payment is going to be $100,000, right? And that $100,000 is going to get you one house or maybe condo.
1,200 right? square feet. Yeah.
That's what it's going to do. Now, after you pay that $100,000, you still have the mortgage payment and you still have the furnishing. Now, this is assuming there's no rehab. So I was just doing the math. Well, and then I started asking myself, well, if I could have, one house for $100,000, how much, if I rented it, how much would it really cost? Because what does that $100,000 really buy me? It buys me control. So what I need is control. Well, is there a cheaper way to get control? And the answer is yes. There are many strategies for doing so. And I was like, well, if I can take that same $100,000 but negotiate control as opposed to ownership, then I could get more units going at the same time. Mm-hmm. And when I realized that, because I said to myself, well, how many units is it going to take to have a down payment per month, period? Okay. And that's what I want everybody thinking about. When you're going after the lease strategy, the reason you're doing it is to replace your income if you need to, but also to stack enough cash so that every month your short-term rental business produces a down payment so that you can then go own. So if your down payments are $100,000, then you need enough units to produce $100,000 of net free cash flow on a monthly basis so that you can go out there and buy a house or a building or apartment complex, whatever, every month, whatever that is for you. And when I realized you could do that faster with with control versus ownership, cheaper. And I mean, we literally had students in 72 hours go from learning about the strategy to actually getting a lease in place, starting to order furniture, and up in the next 7 days after that.
Yeah.
That is a real thing.
That's
wow.
Crazy. Well, yeah. Plus, it's not like you have a 2-month period of waiting to get control of the house if you're buying. You can get into a rental much quicker.
Correct.
Now, is that something now let's say you were at a position where you could do 10 of these leases.
Yep.
Would you go up to that person and just tell them exactly what you wanted to do, the owner, and they were cool with it because
always.
they're getting their money anyways?
Always. Because, and in fact, the very funny that you mentioned.
Well, I ask because we do get instances of landlords complaining in our group, and rightfully so, that their tenants are subleasing without permission. So,
sure. Well, and that's why you want to work with your tenant because, again, remember, the idea is out there. Good luck trying to enforce it. That all I'm saying is the idea is out there. I'm saying it's probably more beneficial for you to work with your tenant as opposed to creating this black market of sorts that then causes, corners to be cut because they're trying to do it on the sly. And that's one of the things that we're very direct about. In fact, my perfect landlord is someone who just completed a rehab on a 10, 20, 30 unit building and is 100% vacant, because I will come to them and say, cool, I'll take like 10, 20, 15 of these right now.
Yeah.
Lease them all, get them all done. That's great. That is my perfect situation. And the situation that we're looking for. We want those of you who have occupancy to contact us, because the one thing I don't have is enough locations.
Yeah. Very cool. I love it. I'm learning so much on this episode. So many different ways of thinking about ways to make income. And I love the fact that you're not just a traditional, like get some rental properties. You get 1, you get 4, you'll get 8, you'll get 12. You're like, no, let's fast track that. And there's ways to do it. And you're figuring them out and sharing with everyone. It's awesome.
Well, and that understand, I was coming from the place of, I was fighting for food. Let's not forget that. I didn't have food to eat. And I needed a source of income without having to physically work every day. And that's the craziest part about this business with short-term rentals is once you have the automation set up that we teach, once you know how to put the right people in place, there are some units I have not been to in months. Like, I mean, I know where they are.
Yeah.
But I haven't physically been there in so long. Like, I just don't have to go.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that this is possible today. And because of technology and all this other stuff, it is. But understand, it was just born out of, I need a way to eat, because if we ever get sick again or something like that happens to us, I don't want to go through what we went through last time. And I can't be the only one who feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I learned that, there are a lot of, again, fathers, mothers, husbands, friends, brothers, etc., doing things on a day-to-day basis, sitting in traffic or going to a job that they don't really want to do simply because they feel either trapped. That's the high income earners. They feel trapped. Like, what else can I do?
Yep.
Or they don't know what else to do, and they just need a way to eat. And then, they've never had time or the mental, emotional space to think about retirement. They're like, whatever, that's just not going to happen. I mean, how many seniors out there are going, I'm going to live too long, I have to keep working?
Yeah. It's such an awful thing to even, let escape your lips too, that it's a concern that you're going to live too long,
Exactly.
That's like where your mindset's at. It's like, all right, it's time to change some course of direction somewhere here and start figuring out a different path, because that's a sentence that should never leave your mouth.
And that's what goes, and that's the stuff that I was hearing. And I was like, there's got to be a solution. And I didn't want, and I feel like this is a very great solution for all ages, right, and stages of life. And it brings with it so much job creation, so much wealth creation, income creation. You get to meet some very interesting people, for sure. And you learn so much as you go through this process. Some of our students have started involving their own kids, and some have, for the first time, gotten to go pick up their kids from school. Yeah. I mean, there are just these stories over and over again. And, they're taking, I went on a vacation and we still made money while we were gone. I'm just like, yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think sometimes passive income is kind of this like mythological unicorn beast in the forest that people don't believe exists, but it definitely does. And you're proof of that. And it's been really cool having you on the podcast, Jay. So much information. And you said if people want to reach out to you, the best place to go would be cashflowdiary.com. Yeah,
well, obviously cashflowdiary.com, or they can go to the podcast, cashflowdiarypodcast.com. Either way, we'll eventually get your notice or whatever it is that we can do to help you out, because at the end of the day, the reason Cashflow Diary exists is to create more entrepreneurs that want to go out there and be about something, not just earn more money, but be about something, because you've got a mission, you've got something you care about. And typically it's only money and time that you need more of. And this is one of the few strategies that I've ever found where you can actually as you earn more money, you actually end up with more time too.
That sounds pretty good to me. I think it probably sounds pretty good to our listeners. So yeah, check out the podcast. Go to his website. There's some cool resources on there too. And your podcast too. I think you go, does that come out twice a week?
Mondays and Thursdays.
Mondays and Thursdays. He's got some great guests on there. And yeah, Jay, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Learning a ton. Very insightful, but also encouraging listening to you and your story and what you've been able to do and achieve. It's really cool.
Thanks for having me, sir. It was awesome.
Take care.